you go ahead and take a look at the back wall here, all right, you're going to see 4 historical thinking skills. They're in the black posters. Chronological reasoning, historical interpretation and synthesis, comparison, contextualization, and crafting historical arguments from evidence. AP US History class, all right, which many of you are going to be taking, is different than the AP US History class that maybe your cousins, your brothers, or sisters took a few years back. There was a redesign, all right, and a much more grander focus on historical thinking skills. For those of us who are taking AP Euro, raise your hand next year, all right? They're going through a redesign as well, and they too are going to be modeled similar to that of the AP US History, and they're going to be a greater focus on historical thinking skills, okay? The one in which we're going to be focusing on here today is periodization. Periodization, all right, is the process or study of categorizing the past into discrete, quantified names, blocks of time. Now, to be honest with you, all right, for the kids who have taken my class in the past, they're a little bit familiar with this, but they've never been taught this before, okay? We talked about periodization, we talked about periods in history, but it wasn't necessarily to the level in which I'm going to be focusing on it this year, all right? Jane, do you remember the term periods being on the AP US History test? Okay, do you remember what part of the test you were most familiar with that term coming about? Absolutely. Your DBQ, all right, your long essay FRQ questions, that's where you'll be seeing the term period the most, okay? Now, granted, maybe we didn't talk about it as much, but Jamie was familiar with it enough, but next year, I'm going to be eliminating the term units from our class. And what we're going to be doing is, instead of me calling our units, we're going to be calling them periods. Now, we kind of did this in my class last year. I said unit/period. But next year, it's strictly going to be called periods, which goes hand in hand with US history much closer. I mean, the AP US history test doesn't use the term unit at all on the test. Not once, not at all. But they use the word period. So when we're taking a test, we're taking a test over period 1, not unit 1. And I think that's going to help us be more familiar and comfortable with the term on the test. All right? Now, in addition to that, okay, as you can see, each period, all right, in time is broken from anywhere from about 50 to 40 some years in history. Okay? This is how the AP US History curriculum is broken down into quantitative categories. All right? Now, to sharpen this skill, all right, of periodization, and I believe this is going to make studying history a lot easier for us. Okay? Our approach to studying history sometimes in class is that a lot of us walk in assuming that we have to memorize names and dates. How many people think much of history is studying names and dates? How many people are terrible with names and dates? Raise your hand. Okay, it doesn't fail. Students, parents, friends, anyone who says, oh, you're a history teacher? Oh, I was terrible with names and dates. Right? Studying names and dates makes studying history boring. Okay? And almost ineffective. Okay? Being able to break things down into periods makes things a lot easier. Okay? And that's what this skill is going to do here. This is the skill that you're going to want to have, all right, in order to start the school year off on the right foot. So let me pass it out to you, a little activity that we're going to do. Our activity is, although we've only been on this earth 15 to 17 years, we've lived long enough to reflect on the formative moments and events. With a partner, we're going to divide our life into 4 periods. We're going to define each stage of our life, state the ages of this period, and list the events that support this description. Okay? How long have you been up, sir? 16 years. All right? You're going to take those 16 years, and you're going to break them up into 4 periods. However you want to do it, it's fine. How many years will you want to put in each period is up to you, okay? You are going to describe those blocks, and then you're going to give events, big or small, all right, that go along with those periods. You follow me? All right, keep this in mind, all right? Have you ever used this cliche? That was so middle school. Have you ever done that before? Oh, that was so elementary. Okay? Right? So think about what falls into those periods. Okay? Any questions? All right.
So this is like kindergarten to what the support teachers, elementary, so like 1 through 5, 5 to 11,
Yeah.
0 to 7, no, 1 through 8 for like kids.
So do we
Don't you start?
13.
Do you start? You start nursery like 11, or 12.
middle school?
So we'll start from period 1 to 0.
No, I started at 12. Yeah, you start at 12. What do you
8.
Should we just do it backwards?
Yeah.
Wait, of course. We want the age of our, I mean, the year, like our age or year as in like 2000.
Your age, man.
Not really like about
Yeah. So 14 to 16. So with this, we'd start off with
it's kind of like
kindergarten.
0 to 5?
0, you got it. Yeah. At least it can be 0 to 5 if you want, or 0 to whatever. It's up to you. Definitely 0 is where you start.
We kind of started what we still continuing.
like school.
Yeah.
Try to describe.
So this will be 11 to 13.
No, because I was
What can you say from your point?
And then this, okay, let's do this first. This is do 5 to 10.
Our periods in our life here. What ages did you guys put in period 1?
Period 1 was 0 to 8, so basically.
0 to 8. What did you guys? 0 to 4? And what did you guys put? 0 to 4? And how about you guys? 0 to 4? And what about you guys?
0.
0 to 4, okay? Like commonality in there, huh? All right, how would we define that period? How did you guys define that? Oh, you're about to sneeze, I'm sorry, I will call you. How would you define period 1?
I put that I was
You're born, curiosity, and your personality started to shape. All right. How about you guys? How would you guys define period 1 in your life?
We wrote the basis of who you are, mainly established by your family.
Mainly established by the influence of the family. Very good. Very good. How can periodizing history make for studying history easier for us as students? So how can dividing history into periods make for studying history easier for us? What are your thoughts? How can this make things easier for us when it comes to studying history?
It's easier to remember.
Say it again.
It's easier to remember.
How's it easier to remember?
Because like, if we like say, oh, this happened, I don't know, like if you mix up the dates, it's like more confusing.
So you don't have to remember all the dates, you just kind of have to remember
What happened?
when it kind of happened, you know, in this time. What else? Yes?
It makes it so that it's more involving and you can see yourself in this time period since you're devoting so much time to the time period instead of focusing on dates and people.
You can focus more on the time period as opposed to the individuals and the dates. So like when I'm walking down the street and Harriet Tubman walks by, all I have to say is, oh, that is so period 5, right? Or when Al Capone comes walking down the street, I can say, oh, that is so period 7, right? That's a lot easier than trying to remember like the month and the date and exactly the year, correct? That makes things a lot easier. Yes?
And it's also like, I know for me when we used to do DBQs, it was like use evidence from like period 6. Say you don't know much evidence from period 6, but you know the general idea of like what happened, so it makes it easier for you to put that extra synthesis point on the DBQ.
Absolutely. Like you said, you hit the nail right on the head. When you have the general idea of that period, okay, that makes studying a lot easier. Yes?
It also makes it easier when, like, sometimes if you forget the time period, what the event happened, you can reference it like, well, you know, it happened after this event, and you can kind of figure out the years when it happened if the date comes.
Absolutely. It definitely kind of narrows yourself down a little bit to helping you actually pinpoint when things happened and when they did. Okay? Now let me ask, my next question is to our previous AP US history students. Okay? Would this been beneficial for you to start August off like this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Definitely. It would have?
Yeah, because where did that come from?
Yeah, it's been hanging back there and stuff.
I remember like the first week, like you touched on it,
Yeah, you
but then we started realizing that it's at like it was more unit based. And I think talking about periods was what I was.
Jamie, it would have been helpful for.
Yeah, I think they would have. So like remember all the events happened instead of like just specifically like going up to the dates.
And I think, so in regards to the advice to our future sophomores, you know, those who are going to be juniors, I think when you approach this school year, you're going to be overwhelmed by a lot of your work, but when your approach, don't approach it from, I have to write down all these names and these events down. Approach it to kind of understanding how they fall into the period. Just recognizing the period. You know, so just like in your own personal life, when someone says the Jonas Brothers, what period of your life comes to your mind?
And I was like,
11. So that would be your period 4, right? Or 3?
period 2.
Period 2 or 3 for you.
Period
Okay?
2
2 and 3. But when we say Nick Jonas, what do we say? Period 4, high school, right? Okay. So again, when we go and we talk about, when you look at names or events or things that happen, you'll be able to plot them into those periods a lot easier for you. It'll make understanding those periods a lot better.
What's the difference from this and you saying like the 16th century?
Good question. Like, how is this different from us actually saying, oh, the 1960s or the 16th century and stuff? What makes it different is that this is the terminology that you're going to be getting on the AP test. Okay? And if you really think about it, by just saying unit doesn't really apply to that of like how historians study history and stuff. Periods, the term period does. Okay? So it's a term that makes more sense to use when applying history. But it's not that you've ever been wrong when you've studied centuries and stuff like that before. Same thing, okay? Same thing. But this just more or less is exactly how the College Board is going to do it. So that's why we want to make sure that we use it as often, so that we won't be surprised, we'll be most comfortable when we're studying the test. To 1607. It's defined as on North American continent controlled by American Indians. All right. Contact amongst those people of Europe, the Americas, and West Africa created a new world. All right. So, all right, what did that mean? Like, how was this like a new world? Well, when we think about the fact that we had Mayas, Aztecs, Incas all here prior to the Europeans, okay, who's going to show up in 1492? Columbus, right? Sails the ocean blue. All right? And with Columbus, we know that anytime you have people who've never met before, there's an exchange. All right? Somebody moves on the block, you're going to walk over with a plate of cookies, say, hi, welcome, we're neighbors, right? Here's an exchange of cookies, right, to them. Well, unfortunately, with some of that exchange, sometimes it's also negative. So what's going to come with it? Smallpox, right? So what's going to happen to the Mayas, Aztecs, and Incas? They're all going to die, right? Okay? But also, there is also positive exchange too. We're going to have horses and cows and chocolate and coffee, all that stuff's going to go back and forth from the different groups. Okay? So it's going to be a lot easier when you say, oh, yeah, this is the birth of a new country, and there's an exchange of things. It's going to be a lot easier to kind of understand how all of these fall into it, as opposed to just trying to, memorize who Bartolomé de las Casas was and stuff like that. That's going to make things a lot more challenging if you don't understand how they fit into this period. Your hands raised.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, for this class, in period 1, how often do subjects from AP
Great question, all right? And we're going to talk about what synthesis means and understanding like how these things impact like in the world, like how the role the United States plays in the world, all right? If you can make the connection to what you learned in AP Euro into AP US History on an essay, it's going to score you a point for synthesis, okay? So every time you can do that, that's a good thing, all right? As well as anything you might have learned in your honors world history class, all right? Maybe you learned in your geography class. That's a good thing, okay? So yeah, that's an excellent question, and it will happen. It will happen.